Divorce party gone wrong. The ballroom at the top of the Harborview Hotel shimmered so brightly that anyone stepping out of the elevator might have mistaken it for a wedding reception, and only later, upon reading the banner suspended above the cake, realized that the vows had long since unraveled. White roses cascaded from tall crystal vases arranged along the walls, their scent heavy, faintly bruised by the warmth of the room. Gold-rimmed champagne flutes stood in military rows upon linen-draped tables, catching, and multiplying, the chandelier light. At the center, beneath a sweep of pale silk and fairy lights, rose a four-tier cake iced in a restrained wash of powder blue, each layer edged in delicate sugar pearls. The banner behind it announced, in looping silver letters large enough to be read from across the room, "Congratulations on your freedom, Lila Hartford." Lila stood just inside the ballroom doors, one hand wrapped around the stem of her champagne flute so tightly that the condensation soaked into her palm, making the glass slippery. The silver dress clung to her frame in a way she had once imagined would make her husband's eyes darken with appreciation, on a beach at sunset, perhaps, during a renewal ceremony she had daydreamed about in idle, comfortable afternoons. Instead, the fabric shimmered beneath hotel lighting while strangers, well-dressed strangers who happened to know her, turned and applauded. The applause startled her. Her shoulders jumped toward her ears before she could stop them, and the sound that left her mouth was half laugh, half startled breath. She stepped forward too quickly, heel catching against the plush carpet, and would have pitched sideways if Camille Devereux had not seized her elbow with steady fingers. "Easy," Camille murmured, leaning close enough that Lila caught the familiar jasmine perfume she'd worn since college. Lila swallowed, straightened. "Too much?" she asked, though the words scraped against her throat. Camille took in the roses, the cake, the banner, the glitter cannons stacked discreetly near the bar, the guests already raising glasses in salute. "It looks like you're about to marry yourself," she said, lips twitching. "Which, honestly, I would attend." Lila's mouth curved despite the tightness behind her eyes. "That's the plan." Music surged from the speakers, something upbeat, defiant, and more guests filtered in from the hallway. A cluster of women from Lila's gym waved near the bar, already flushed and gleeful. Two of her cousins, who had once tolerated Ethan Hartford with stiff politeness and now openly detested him, clinked glasses in the corner. College friends called her name with theatrical reverence. She scanned the room quickly, habit born of years hosting dinner parties and charity events at Ethan's side, who had arrived, who had not. Then her gaze flicked to the far end of the ballroom. The lighting dimmed without warning. A single spotlight flared to life. The man standing in that circle of light looked as though he'd stepped onto a stage he had built himself. Tall, shoulders clean beneath a black suit jacket worn without a tie. Dark hair slightly too long for strict corporate taste, but neatly controlled. A clipboard rested in one hand, held like an accessory rather than a tool. When he spoke, his voice carried easily over the music. "Ladies and gentlemen," he drawled, amusement at the corners of his mouth, "welcome to the most aggressively therapeutic rebranding event of the year." Laughter rippled through the room. Lila pressed her lips together, failed to keep from smiling too broadly. Adrian Vale. That was how he'd introduced himself over the phone 3 weeks earlier, at 2 in the morning, when she'd called with a trembling voice and a plan that didn't. He stepped out of the spotlight and walked toward her. The light followed him in a way that felt conspiratorial, as if the room itself were complicit. "You're late," she said when he stopped in front of her. The accusation lacked heat. "I was inflating your ex-husband," he replied calmly. Camille inhaled sharply, then choked on her champagne. Lila blinked. "I approved something symbolic," she said carefully. "And I specialize in symbolism with impact." He inclined his head toward the far corner of the ballroom. There, tethered beside the dessert table, floated a life-sized piñata shaped unmistakably like Ethan Hartford. The resemblance was exaggerated enough to provoke laughter, but detailed enough to be uncomfortable. A navy tie hung crookedly around its cardboard neck. A briefcase, painted paper, affixed at a jaunty angle, completed the likeness. Guests noticed. The room tipped into delighted chaos. "That's ridiculous," Lila said, though her shoulders had already begun to shake with reluctant laughter. You signed the approval form. She had. At the time, she'd imagined something abstract. Faceless. Seeing Ethan's jawline rendered in papier-mâché was something else entirely. Adrian's gaze lingered on her face a beat longer than necessary. Assessing. Something flickered in his eyes, concern, perhaps, but vanished before she could catch it. "Shall we begin?" he asked. Her throat felt dry. She lifted her champagne flute, swallowed the last of it, bubbles biting her tongue, and nodded. The party began in earnest. By the time the first brave volunteer launched into an impassioned rendition of "I Will Survive," the ballroom had grown warm with bodies and laughter. The air thickened, perfume, sugar, the faint metallic tang of champagne, all of it clinging to skin and silk. A coworker flung her arms wide during the chorus and nearly knocked over a tray of drinks. Camille followed with a sultry, wildly overcommitted performance that left the room howling. Lila found herself in the center of it all, clapping too hard, laughing too loudly, as if volume alone could drown out the image that kept flashing, unbidden, behind her eyelids. Ethan, leaning over his phone, smiling at a message she had not yet known existed. Adrian moved through the crowd like a conductor, adjusting the music, murmuring instructions to hotel staff, calibrating the energy with precise ease. Every so often his gaze found Lila again, never lingering long enough to draw attention, long enough to confirm she was still upright, still here, still participating. When the karaoke finally wound down, he stepped onto the small platform near the cake and tapped the microphone once. "Now," he announced, dry, amused, "we move to the ceremonial dismantling." The spotlight swung toward the Ethan piñata. Cheers erupted, some playful, some vicious. Lila's stomach tightened so suddenly she felt it in her fingertips. The room tilted, just a fraction, and the laughter warped at the edges. Camille's hand found hers, squeezing hard. "You don't have to," Camille murmured. Lila let out a short, sharp laugh, one she barely recognized as her own. "Of course I do." Adrian approached with the bat. It was bright pink, plastic, absurd, subtle, she muttered. "Aim for the ego," he replied quietly. She took it. The bat felt flimsy in her grip, too light for the weight it carried. The blindfold slipped over her eyes. Darkness. The world dissolved into sound, cheering, teasing directions, the scrape of heels on carpet. Someone spun her gently by the shoulders. Glitter shifted treacherously beneath her feet. She took one cautious step forward. Then another. Her first swing cut through empty air. Laughter burst around her. Not cruel, but sharp enough to sting. She adjusted her grip, swung again, harder. The bat connected with something that resisted, then gave. The jolt ran up her arms, into her shoulders. Heat flared behind her ribs. Her breath came fast, shallow. She swung again, no longer careful. On the fourth strike, cardboard tore. Something burst overhead. Candy, and folded paper, rained down around her. The blindfold was pulled away. Light rushed in. The piñata's face had split cleanly in two. The torso sagged open, spilling sweets, and printed screenshots of text messages. Stark black letters on white paper. The messages she had found one night, while looking for a recipe on Ethan's tablet. "Miss you already." Last night was. The room quieted. Just for a heartbeat. Then someone laughed, startled, and bent to grab a piece of candy. Lila crouched, lifting one of the sheets. The words blurred as her eyes filled unexpectedly. Her throat constricted, tight as if fingers had closed around it. Adrian stepped closer, didn't touch her, but his presence was solid at her side. "You okay?" he asked, low. She nodded too quickly. "Perfect," she said, and the words scraped her mouth. She crumpled the paper in her fist, flung it upward like confetti. "Free souvenirs," she called brightly. Music surged back to life. Guests shrieked, laughed, dug for candy and scandal in equal measure. Lila straightened, smiling wide enough to ache. Her hands didn't stop trembling for several minutes. Later, after champagne had dulled the sharpest edges, Adrian guided the party toward its next spectacle. A long table near the bar had been transformed into an auction stage. Velvet draped, piled with items once tucked into drawers and closets of Lila's home. Designer watches, monogrammed cufflinks, golf clubs polished to a mirror sheen, framed photographs, Ethan's face scratched out in deliberate, jagged lines. Ladies and gentlemen, Adrian intoned, adjusting the microphone with exaggerated solemnity, welcome to the liquidation of mediocrity. Laughter rippled. Lila sank into a velvet chair beside the stage, legs crossed tight at the ankles, fingers curled around her glass. She watched pieces of her married life lifted, displayed, reassigned, each with theatrical flair. The first watch sold quickly. A honeymoon photo followed, Camille bidding aggressively until she won, lifting it triumphantly. With every item that left the table, something shifted in Lila's chest. The hollowness loosened, replaced by a strange buoyancy, almost relief, but sharper edged. Then, the ballroom doors opened. The sound of hinges cut through the laughter. Conversation faltered, died, heads turned. Ethan Hartford stepped inside as if entering a business conference, not a room draped in banners celebrating his ex-wife's freedom. Immaculate suit, precisely arranged hair, composure stretched almost too tight. Beside him stood a woman in red. Young, sleek, unmistakably uncomfortable. The air changed temperature. Lila felt it in her spine, snapping straight. Champagne tilted over her knuckle, cold against heated skin. Heat rushed to her face so fast she thought she might faint. Ethan's gaze swept the decorations. The cake, the shredded remains of his piñata likeness. His jaw tightened, barely. Then he saw her. Lila, he said. The sound of her name made her flinch before she could stop herself. Adrian saw it. She rose slowly, smoothing her dress with hands that refused to steady. Wrong party? She asked. Cool, clear, despite the pounding in her ears. A murmur swept the room. Ethan stepped forward. The woman in red hovered just behind his shoulder. This is childish, he said, scanning the room as if assessing a failed presentation. The word struck deeper than the bat had. Childish. 10 years of mortgage payments. 10 years of holidays and tax returns. 10 years of learning his breathing in the dark. Childish. Her mouth curved, thin. What's childish, she replied evenly, is bringing your assistant to a divorce party. Gasps. Delighted cackles. The woman flushed crimson, eyes fixed on the floor. Ethan's composure slipped, a fraction. You're embarrassing yourself. Ice slid under her skin. We can discuss this privately, he added, stepping closer. Her body reacted before her mind. She stepped back, heel catching on glitter. Adrian moved, not abruptly, not dramatically. He positioned himself between them. Sir, he said politely, this is a ticketed event. Ethan's irritation sharpened. And you are the event planner. Ethan looked past him, to Lila. Fire him. The room contracted around the command. Fire him, like she was still an extension of his authority. Her fingers closed around the auction gavel. Cool, solid. She brought it down. Crack. Next item, she announced, voice ringing, ex-husband's favorite leather jacket. Applause exploded. Someone whistled. Ethan's jaw tightened visibly. You're being ridiculous. She didn't look at him again. Starting bid, $100. The jacket sold for 3 times its value. The winner lifted it overhead like a trophy. Ethan stood rigid near the entrance until the final item, the golf clubs, was claimed amid mockery and cheers. Then he turned and left. The doors closed with a muted thud. Silence, just long enough to feel deliberate. Then the music surged back, louder than before. Lila's legs went hollow, adrenaline drained, leaving tremor in its wake. She stepped down from the stage, and nearly stumbled. Adrian's hand caught her elbow. Careful, he murmured. I'm fine, she said, voice wavering. He didn't argue. You didn't invite him, she said after a moment. No, good. He hesitated. He doesn't like being excluded. She turned sharply. You speak like you know him. I do. How? He's my older brother. The floor tilted. You're joking. I'm not. Adrian Hartford. Veil. Professionally. Fragments snapped into place, dismissed comments, half-remembered complaints. You didn't tell me. I wanted the job. That's not enough. He rewrites history, Adrian said evenly. I prefer alternate editions. She studied him, tired, not triumphant. You're enjoying this. Yes. The honesty startled her. Then she laughed, soft, incredulous. Well, pour me another drink. The party wound down gradually after that. The earlier frenzy softened into pockets of conversation, low laughter, murmured goodbyes, the clink of glasses set carefully on tables. Guests drifted toward the elevators clutching auction prizes and half-eaten slices of cake. Glitter cannons, fired with enthusiastic excess, left the carpet shimmering beneath tired feet. By midnight, only a handful of people remained. Camille hugged Lila fiercely near the entrance, arms tight enough to bruise. You were magnificent, she whispered. Call me tomorrow. I will, Lila promised. When the last guest finally departed, the ballroom felt cavernous. Hotel staff moved with quiet efficiency, stacking chairs, clearing tables, sweeping up candy wrappers and crumpled paper. A vacuum hummed faintly in the distance. Lila slipped off her heels. Barefoot, she crossed the cool marble floor toward the balcony doors, the chill soothing against overheated skin. She picked up a plate with a single slice of cake and pushed the doors open. Night air brushed her shoulders. Below, the city stretched wide and glittering, harbor lights scattered across dark water, traffic humming like a distant tide. She leaned against the railing and took a small bite of cake. The sweetness coated her tongue, almost too much. Behind her, Adrian's voice carried softly as he gave final instructions to the hotel manager. Calm, measured. When he finished, footsteps approached. You survived, he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It trembled at the edges. Is that what this was? He rested his forearms on the railing, eyes on the city. You didn't run. I considered it. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. They stood in silence. Not awkward, held. The air cooled, raising goosebumps along her arms. You hate him, she said finally. Yes. The word was simple, unsoftened. She turned to study his profile. Why? His fingers tightened subtly on the railing. For a moment she thought he might deflect. Instead, when we were children, he said slowly, he pushed me into a lake and told everyone I jumped. She blinked. A surprised huff of laughter escaped her. That's almost ordinary. He locked me in the trunk of his car once. The humor died on her tongue. For hours, he added. Told our parents it was a game. The wind lifted a strand of her hair across her face. She didn't brush it away. He's very good at telling stories, Adrian said. She looked down at the cake in her hand, frosting melting against porcelain. So am I, she murmured. He glanced at her. I told myself tonight was bold, she said, softer now. But when he walked in, my legs stopped working. Silence again, intentional this time. You didn't let him take the microphone, Adrian said at last. She laughed faintly, almost disbelieving. That's progress, I suppose. The city flickered below them, indifferent. Thank you, she said suddenly. For what? For not stepping aside when he told me to fire you. He huffed softly. That would have made for a very short evening. She turned toward him fully then. In the balcony light, his scar was clearer. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes. You're terrible, she said. So I've been told. Something shifted. Subtle, undeniable. The earlier spectacle had drained away, leaving only night air and proximity. Lila stepped closer, without quite deciding to. Silver fabric brushed his suit jacket. She felt the warmth of him, steady, grounding. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she reached up and kissed him. Brief, tentative, as if testing temperature. She pulled back almost immediately. He exhaled, low and surprised. That, he said quietly, was not in the event proposal. Her cheeks warmed. No, he studied her, giving her space. She didn't take it. His hand lifted, hovered near her waist, then settled lightly against her dress. When he kissed her back, it was careful, unhurried, as if both of them understood how thin the line was between impulse and regret. The city hummed beneath them. Inside, the vacuum whirred over glitter. When they parted, her lips tingled. Her breath shook despite her effort to steady it. "Well," she murmured, a soft laugh escaping, "this party certainly escalated." His thumb brushed her jaw, then fell away. "Most of the good ones do." She rested her forehead briefly against his shoulder, feeling the rise and fall of his breath. The cake sat forgotten on the railing, frosting melting into a pale blue smear. Below them, the city continued, endless, unaware. And in a ballroom high above the harbor, amid glitter and broken cardboard and the echo of applause, something fragile and new took its first careful step into the night, and